Well, let's get the view now from the US. William Lawrence is a former US diplomat and professor of international relations at the American University. He joins us now from Washington, D.C. Now, Donald Trump expressed surprise when Britain made this announcement, said that the British Prime Minister didn't actually talk to him about the recognition of Palestine. More countries now are coming to that conclusion that they need to recognize Palestine. Is the US out of step with this?
Absolutely. And even if this isn't a big step in the humanitarian sense, if you're starving in Gaza, you know, these words of diplomats and politicians maybe don't matter that much. But diplomatically, this is massive. And what really struck me was the specificity of Starmer's demands. He's talking about 500 trucks a day and no annexations in Gaza. You know, the type of specificity we haven't heard before. And if the whole world, including the Gulf allies that Trump depends on so much in terms of his thinking, all turn to Trump with that sort of specific outlined and common cause, it will have an effect on Trump. And Trump did hear from Starmer in great specificity about the suffering in Gaza, and they did talk about, you know, needing to do more, and that's one of the reasons why Trump, you know, emerging from his visit to Scotland is talking about the suffering in Gaza. And so, you know, all of this matters, even if it doesn't fix the problem instantaneously. Everyone's moving in the right direction now, both in terms of pressuring Israel and in terms of pressuring the United States.
But let's talk about that pressure on Israel. Let's talk about that pressure on the US. The US has been able to resist that pressure for a very long time. Israel has been able to resist that pressure for a very long time because of the domestic constituency in the States. Just talk us through, is that changing? Is there less of a pro-Israel stance happening in the US now?
Yes, and it's very much young Republicans, young MAGAs, you know, who have seen the images on social media, have new voices like Candace Owen and Tucker Carlson, who I agree with on almost nothing, but make very strong pro-Palestinian cases. And if you look at the latest polling data, Trump is underwater with young Republicans on the Gaza issue. So he pays attention to that. And it also it's creeping into the evangelical vote writ large. And evangelicals are appalled by, you know, suffering, you know, when they get it in their news. And right now in U.S. media, as you know well, we're being barraged with Israeli talking points about rewarding Hamas and all that stuff, but it's increasingly falling on deaf ears, especially among young people from the left and the right who don't even look at the mainstream media for, you know, to develop their political opinions anymore. So this is part of that communications revolution going on where young supporters of Trump are no longer trusting, you know, what they're getting in the mainstream media about Israel.
But that's being reflected in the sort of MAGA, I don't want to say MAGA leadership, but people who are very publicly pro-Make America Great Again. People like Marjorie Taylor Greene, a very senior member of that ideology. Even she says now that this is, you know, starvation. So that sea change that you're talking about within young Republicans, is that going to translate to the people that actually shape that MAGA philosophy?
Eventually, yes. I mean, the Israeli lobby has deep roots in the United States. They're strong. They've been all over the media today claiming that images of starving Gazans are fabricated and coming from different crises at different times. And yet we know there are doctors, there are aid workers in Gaza who themselves are starving, you know, and it's hard to overcome that type of personal testimony, which is also creeping into right-wing media. And so it won't be an instantaneous fix, but we've gone from an America where about 5% of Americans are pro-Palestinian to the latest polling says about 40%. 45%. It's the majority viewpoint in the Democratic Party, and it's getting there in the Republican Party. And if it doesn't fix things in the next few weeks or even months, there will be a sea change over the longer term in the U.S. position towards Palestinians because of what's going on.
Let's talk very quickly about the most vaunted bit of the relationship between America and the UK, this special relationship that it's called. What Keir Starmer did was recognize Palestine, but with a clause that Israel could actually turn this around if they got a ceasefire, if they stop the starvation. Do you think that that was Keir Starmer almost giving an olive branch to Donald Trump, knowing that, it gives him a bit of a get-out clause here? Does it affect relations between the US and the UK?
Kind of. He did take a middle position between France and the U.S. and the Gulf states and the U.S., but the specificity of what he laid out, 500 trucks a day, no annexations in Gaza, are so difficult for Netanyahu and his right-wing coalition to overcome that it's going to be very difficult for that out to really be an out that Netanyahu can take advantage of, and therefore Trump. In terms of the U.S.-UK relationship, I don't think so. So many countries now lecture the United States on Israel and Palestine so vocally and so emphatically and with so much data and emotionality that just the UK, or silent Germany, will that be enough to create a buffer for Trump? No, I think it's quite the opposite. I think now, with the overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian positions around the world that is now getting into the G7 and Security Council members, that creates Trump's space to walk away further from Netanyahu. And that'll be the tension going forward, because there are people within Trump's administration that are extremely pro-Israel and anti-Hamas, and there are many others that are increasingly sympathetic towards the Palestinians, including his two Middle East envoys, Witkoff and Barak. And similarly in the UK, of course, there are differences of opinion. But when certain people make these bold moves like Starmer did, that creates space for moves by others, including Trump.
William Lawrence, thank you very much for your thoughts. Interesting as ever.
A pleasure.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.